What's up, people? Welcome to another exciting edition of the Black and Gold Hour podcast, a podcast that's New Orleans Saints themed. It's your guy, Merv, and today we have a special guest. Honestly, I'm still in the early stages of my sports writer and content creator career, so it's always an honor for me to speak with those who've been doing it much longer and doing it at a high level. So today I have host and reporter of the Saints News Network, Brendan Boylan. How are you today, man?
I'm good, Merv. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I really appreciate it because it's a lot going on in Who Dat Nation with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, it's been a long 4 years. I mean, a lot of highs and a lot of lows. It's been a long journey. But before we kind of talk about the New Orleans Saints journey, I want to talk about your journey and just introduce yourself to the people, how you became a host and reporter, and what led you to create content for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, so my name is Brendan Boylan, currently 24 years old. I got started in the sports reporting, broadcasting world when I was 16. I went to a high school and they needed some online content in terms of play-by-play work for my high school football team. And Deshaun Watson was in our region. So obviously there's a lot of media attention in our region. So I got the opportunity to do that at 16, went and studied at Gardner-Webb University for broadcast journalism, and then got connected with the Saints News Network as a sophomore with an internship. And this was long before Saints News was associated with Sports Illustrated. It was just really a podcasting network. And I got to do that. And then, after the internship, they kept me along. Sports Illustrated came into play. And now I've done ESPN3, Sports Illustrated, NewOrleansSaints.com had me on for some fantasy stuff last year. And then as of recently, I'm now an award-nominated film producer. So a lot of great stuff going on. And a lot of it just started the way that you're starting, Merv, just going, hey, let me do a podcast.
Right. And I like to hear how you were with the Saints News Network before Sports Illustrated. So you were a part of the foundation and you just kept building upon it. And now you're seeing, the fruits of your efforts. So I want to hop into the New Orleans Saints. Now, the last 4 years, the New Orleans Saints have had a lot of heartbreaking playoff losses. We know about all of them. We can rank them. We can forget them forever. But I want to ask you, going into the draft, a lot of our Saints fans and Saints analysts such as yourself had the Saints picking maybe a linebacker, a wide receiver, maybe even going quarterback. I want to know, what was your reaction to the Saints first round selection of Peyton Turner out of University of Houston?
Well, I think we have to start with the reports that came early in that day on Thursday that the Saints were desperately trying to move into the top 10. And obviously that was for a guy like J.C. Horn. And I had talked about it earlier in the week that the Saints were really high on Mac Jones, and some of those reports started coming out post-draft. So you knew the Saints were trying to be aggressive and make a move. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough assets to make that jump. So they get to 28, and they're sticking there. And honestly, there was a couple guys on the board that I really liked for New Orleans. JOK, the linebacker at Notre Dame, was my pick and my mock, I think, the day before the draft. But Peyton Turner, I think at first a lot of people were just shocked. But you also have to go back and look, since 2015, whether it's the Saints' first or second round pick, every single one of them have been used on an offensive or defensive lineman. They're a team that truly believes in the philosophy of building from the inside out. And Cam Jordan, as many beloved, in the New Orleans Saints community, in the Who Dat Nation, he's getting older. Now, he's going to go down as one of the best to ever wear the black and gold. Honestly, the statistics and the rate that he's going at, he's going to have a case to be in the Hall of Fame. But he is getting older. He's coming off of one of his worst seasons in terms of sack production. So I think the move does make sense. I think the thing that had a lot of people concerned is this guy's draft grade was all over the place. Right, you saw him coming up in third rounds. You saw him coming up in fourth rounds, but he had a really good pro day, a really good Senior Bowl. He's a very intellectual and intelligent player. He's raw, though. Honestly, a lot of comparisons in my mind to a guy like Marcus Davenport, which can also be scary because Davenport has had these highs and lows in his NFL career. as well. But the one thing I really love about Peyton Turner, and I know people who like the analysis and the analytics of it probably won't like what I have to say, but I think character is a big part of any athlete. And just when he came and spoke to the media after the draft, the giant smile on his face, he was ready to go. He was ready to work. He was excited. And so far, everything that I've heard, he's been really good in minicamp. The coaches like him, his teammates like him, and I think he's going to be a good fit. But the initial thought when he was drafted was you were a little bit shocked. You didn't feel like it was the biggest position of need, but the Saints got a really smart kid who has a high motor, a lot of energy, and is ready to work.
Right. And I totally agree with you. You had Owusu Koramoah that everybody was talking about. He was the talk of the first 2 days of the draft. Like, where is he going to go? And that was a guy that I actually wrote about, and how his athleticism was something that the New Orleans Saints really needed. I really think that the Saints needed to go athletic in the draft, and I think they ended up doing so. But Peyton Turner, when we saw him, his energy, he was excited. We see him joking, or his teammates joking with him. I saw him, get off the plane with the boots on, and his teammates joking with him. So he's already building, that camaraderie with the rest of the teams. But I kind of want to talk about some of the other draft picks. We got Kawan Baker, Landon Young, Ian Book. We got Paulson Adebo. And let's talk about Paulson Adebo specifically, a cornerback out of Stanford that a lot of fans are excited about. The highlights are nice. He's a converted cornerback from wide receiver. So I want to ask you, what do you expect to see from Adebo in his first year with the New Orleans Saints?
Well, first, I think they got an absolute value pick in the third round. Now, it was a little affected by the fact that he decided to sit out last year because of the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of guys where that was absolutely the case. Hey, we haven't seen you in a year, so your draft stock is going to drop because the NFL, just like every other league in the world, is what have you done for me lately? And as of late, you haven't been on the field. So when I look at a guy like Paulson Adebo, you mentioned it first. Great point. He's a converted wideout to defensive back. So his ball skills are phenomenal. It shows in the 8 interceptions he had in his time at Stanford. He's a big-bodied guy, which I really like. I felt like the Saints needed to get someone a little bit more on the physical side, but he hasn't quite grown into his frame yet. He needs to be a little bit more aggressive at the line. But I think he's got all the tools to be a really good corner and a really good pairing with Marshawn Lattimore. Now, the concern there, too, is we don't know if Marshawn Lattimore is going to be suspended before the beginning of the year and what kind of role Adebo is going to have to really step into as a rookie. I don't think he's completely polished. I don't know if he's going to be the number 2 corner. Obviously, the Saints brought back P.J. Williams, who can play corner and safety. P-Rob, who gets a lot of love-hate from the New Orleans community, but stepped up huge when the Saints needed him last year in a few games. I think I'm going to lean more towards those guys, maybe starting the beginning of the year and letting Adebo get his feet wet. But it's a good year to be a rookie. Unlike last year, you're going to have a full off season. Remember, last year was tough. A lot of these rookies didn't get that full off season. They didn't get to. They were kind of just baptized by fire, for lack of a better term. So Adebo is going to have a little bit more time to work. And I think he's going to be a really, really good player for New Orleans, but you got to give him time. But he's going to be a really good press corner at some point. And like I said, with those ball skills coming from just his DNA as a receiver, he's going to be a ball hawk in the secondary as well.
Right. And when you talk about ball skills and a ball hawk, outside of safety Marcus Williams, we need that in the secondary. How many interceptions could the New Orleans Saints secondary have if they turned their head around? If they were able to make that crucial interception, they'll get their hands on the ball, but they won't bring it down. So I think having a player like Paulson Adebo is really beneficial to the New Orleans Saints' success. And we also adding secondary coach, Chris Richard. We know what he can do and how he can build a secondary up and kind of give them a swagger per se, just to help them, go along through the season and dominate. So
think about this too, because you brought up a good point with bringing Richard in. Look at what he did with the Legion of Boom. And I know that it's a long time ago. I know those guys or some of those guys are once in a generation types of talent, but all of those guys were big bodied, defensive backs, whether it was, Sherman, whether it was Brandon Browner. We'll talk about Seahawks Brandon Browner, not New Orleans Brandon Browner. But all those guys, they were big-bodied guys, and I think Adebo has that size. He's going to put some strength, put some more muscle on him. But I think he's more athletic than anybody that was in that secondary. From the cornerback spot, they had some really athletic safeties, but I think it's kind of a little bit of a blueprint of what he can bring. And what Dennis Allen is looking for. So I think it's a really a match made in heaven. Like I said, to get him in the third round, that's an absolute steal.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody is raving about him in the Who Dat Nation community, as well as outside of the league. When he was drafted, hey, that's a steal. That's a steal. His highlights, one-handed catches. He's doing wide receiver things at the cornerback position. And I really think athleticism, as I keep saying, was an emphasis for the New Orleans Saints headed into the draft. But I kind of want to transition to the big questions surrounding the New Orleans Saints offseason. So as we headed into the offseason, we already knew the New Orleans Saints were going to have to lose some valuable players, those such as Quan Alexander, Emmanuel Sanders, and unfortunately, Janoris Jenkins, who's now with the Titans. So I want to ask you, based on the draft, based on who the New Orleans Saints had to release, what's your offseason grade for the New Orleans Saints as someone who's not so much of a casual fan, but someone who actually looks at them on a deeper level?
I'm going to say B, and I know it's going to surprise some people, but listen, New Orleans was an absolute cap hell, and I feel like we talk about cap hell every year with this team, and just the way that Mickey Loomis has these contracts built, right? But to get from $100 million over the cap to work your way down to be able to make some moves, even though there weren't a lot, that's something in itself, and that's going to deserve a big grade, let alone. Now, the Saints didn't really address wide receiver. I know they did in the 7th round, but that's a big concern. You're going to have some guys step up, and I know a lot of people are high on Marquez Callaway and what he's going to be able to bring. But you got to remember, that guy was an undrafted free agent last year, and he didn't have but 200-something yards in his rookie year, but he had some promise. Traquan Smith, another guy, going to have to step up and do some things that he hasn't done in his early portions of his career. So you look at that, and that's a concern. But you look at the places where they did grab some younger replacements. You look at linebacker, you brought up Quan Alexander to get Werner in the 2nd round, who I think is athletic, not as athletic as Quan Alexander, but he's going to be able to do some things in the open field. I have a little bit of concern with him in coverage, but he'll just grow on that. I think that was a really good pick for New Orleans. You brought up Janoris Jenkins. We already talked about Paulson Adebo and what he can do. Obviously, you weren't able to really fill anybody for Emmanuel Sanders, and I know Emmanuel really wanted to stay in New Orleans, and they were really trying to make that work, but they just couldn't. And I think there was a mutual thing on both sides that they both wanted to come back and make something work. It just didn't happen. And I mentioned, you're going to have some guys step up. I think the one thing that not just New Orleans fans get hung up on, but fans across the league get hung up on is we live in a world where this is the most popular thing in the world, your cell phone, right? So if you're not getting updates every day that your team's signing somebody via Twitter, Scheffner's not tweeting about you guys, Rapp's not tweeting about your team, you get frustrated. You're thinking, what is my team doing? Look at all these guys coming out of the free agent market and signing with new teams. What's New Orleans doing? What's New Orleans doing? But I think given the circumstances, given the fact that there's a lot of pieces of this team that is coming back, and that I really do think this team is a playoff team. And I don't know, if you had asked me, you talked about 4 years and the last 4 years for the Saints. If you had asked me 4 years ago, where would New Orleans be, post Drew Brees? I don't know if 4 years ago, if I would have had the confidence to say they're still a playoff team. But they've built this team really well. Yes, they weren't, sexy, quote unquote, in the draft. They didn't make any big splashes in free agency, but they did what they had to do. Like I said, not able to bring certain guys back. I still have a hunch that Quan Alexander is going to re-sign at some point during the season. There's no inside scoop there. It's just a hunch that I have, and he's working out with Dr. Reef, who is Alvin Kamara's guy in the offseason. So there's still a connection there. I know Saints fans have pointed out he's still working out in Saints gear.
Right.
So I do think that Quan has an interest in coming back, and I think New Orleans is going to pay close attention to his rehab and see maybe if they can sign him and kind of stash him on IR and bring him back, or put him on PUB and bring him back. But overall, I think the Saints get a B grade because of what they were able to do to maneuver through the sticky situation with the cap. And they were still able to get some guys that I think are going to be some key players in 2021.
Right. And I definitely agree with you. Over the last 4 years, going into this offseason, I was thinking to myself, and every time I had this conversation, I said, the core of the New Orleans Saints is still there. They're still contenders. If we remember, this team swept the Bucs twice in the regular season. If it wasn't for a Jared Cook fumble that kind of swung the momentum, we could be talking about this last season in a different light. So it's not as if the New Orleans Saints are out of it. They're now a 6-10 team. It's now 17 games, but it seems like the New Orleans Saints just added pieces. Now, I want to focus on a specific position group that I feel like a lot of fans are frustrated with. And I want to talk about the receiver group. We have Michael Thomas. We know what he can do. Alvin Kamara as a running back. We know what he brings to the passing game. But I want to ask you, should wide receiver have been more of an emphasis going into the offseason? I mean, we lost Emmanuel Sanders. There were so many wide receivers in this draft. I think we had Elijah Moore, De'Ami Brown, so many different wide receivers that brought so many different things. I want to ask you, do the Saints stick with Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith as the supporting role wide receivers, or should they make an emphasis, or should they have made an emphasis going into the offseason?
I think they did. I brought it up a little bit earlier that Emmanuel Sanders was a guy that they were hoping to bring back, and it just didn't happen. One thing I will mention, though, and I said it very early on in this, it's a what have you done for me lately type of league, and that's how fans think. And you look at last season, and Mike Thomas missed 9 games because of injury. You look at Deontay Harris, who was getting a more solidified role in the passing attack, nagging neck injury. And you did have to have guys step up. But I think in that process, we forgot, man, Mike Thomas had 149 catches in 2019. We forget that, Deontay Harris, he's got a more solidified role. Maybe not a Tyreek Hill type of role, but a guy that's definitely going to be used in the passing attack. We forget that Traquan Smith, though, and I just wrote a piece, he's been a fantasy headache for people, but he's one of the better blocking receivers on this team. And he does have some lightning quick speed that we haven't been able to see because of his injuries throughout his career, along with the declining arm of Drew Brees, which all of us love Drew. I loved covering Drew, but we can't deny the fact that his arm wasn't what it was, the last 2, maybe even 3 years of his NFL career. So I don't think Traquan's had a true opportunity to show what he can be as a deep field threat. I think Marquez Callaway is a guy that a lot of people are really high on, and I think he's going to have a good year. I don't think he's going to have a great year. Like I said, you got to give a guy some grace. It's a lot of pressure for an undrafted free agent going into his second year, but I think he's got a lot of promise. And I think New Orleans and the coaching staff and Mickey Loomis saw, I really like this group. There's a lot of promise. We weren't able to put all the pieces together because of injuries last year and because just, 2020 and COVID was a weird year for everybody. So I think they did try to get certain guys back, or they had their eyes on certain pieces. But they really like what they have in that room. And I do too. And I really think that the Saints aren't going to have a true number 2 wideout. It's going to be Michael Thomas and a community. And whether that is Alvin Kamara, because 80-something receptions every year of his career. Whether that's going to be a guy like Traquan Smith, who's going to be a guy who's going to take the top off and show off his speed in the open field. Whether it's going to be Deontay Harris, who's really going to be a great slot option for New Orleans and be a little bit of a joker just with his size and his speed. And then, of course, Marquez Callaway. And there's a list. The list goes on. There's guys like little Jordan Humphrey, who has found some time. Juwan Johnson's not a guy that gets talked about enough. He had a couple starts for the Saints last year. Look how big he is. I remember when he got signed as an undrafted free agent, there was myself and plenty of people said, if Johnson put on another 30 pounds, he could play tight end just with how big he is.
Right.
So you have a lot of guys in that room that New Orleans like. They're young, they're electric. And now you throw in Jameis Winston, who has a big arm. And you're not going to maybe have the same limitations that you did with Drew in terms of being able to take some of those shots downfield. And I think that only helps a receiving core.
Right. And like you were saying, Jameis can make all the throws. Drew Brees in his prime, he was making wide receivers look, Marcus Colston, how he helped his career, Lance Moore. It was so many different wide receivers, Robert Meacham, Devery Henderson, and how he was able to elevate the games of those players. It got to the point on the latter stages of his career where he wasn't essentially able to elevate a player like he was in the past. So Jameis, we talk about Deontay Harris and his impact on the game and how if he wouldn't have got injured against the Bucs, like I said, the whole season could have ended differently if he didn't get injured in that divisional game. So I'm excited to see what the wide receiver group does. Marquez Callaway, yeah, he showed something that the other receivers haven't been able to show, and that's the consistency to get open and find the space to convert third downs. He was excellent in creating those crucial third downs that we needed. But let's talk about a big name wide receiver in the NFC South. Now, the NFC South has a lot of great wide receivers: Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley. But let's talk about Julio Jones. Now, this week he says he's out of there with the Atlanta Falcons. And I know the bad blood between the Saints fans and Atlanta Falcons fans, but there was, rumors and conversations about possibly Julio Jones possibly coming to the Saints. I want to ask your opinion on Julio Jones becoming a New Orleans Saint.
If we're talking about like a Madden franchise or something in a video game, man, let's do it. That would be fun. That would be a lot of fun, but it's not going to happen. It's just not. The Saints don't have the assets to make the move, even if they wanted to. And you know as well as I do that in-division trades just don't happen. They just don't. But the rumor is that Julio is going to be moved potentially as early as this upcoming week, and there's first-round picks on the table for him. The Saints can't afford that. They really can't, and especially with a guy like Julio, as great as he is, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He is one of the best receivers that I've had the privilege of covering. I just missed Megatron. But Julio's been one of the best receivers I've had the chance to, witness and cover and whatnot. And just his unique blend of size, speed, athleticism. If I had to make a guess, though, I think Julio's probably going to go to a team, either New England or Tennessee.
Right.
I think that's the smart thing for the Falcons to get him out of the NFC. He's too talented. He's going to burn you if he gets the chance to. So get him out there. I know Tennessee's made a big push. He's been working out with A.J. Brown and King Henry. So I think Tennessee, there's a little bit of a connection there. I wouldn't be surprised to see him end up there. But to answer your question, there's no chance. I'm going to give it a 0. Heard it here first. 0% chance that Julio's in the black and gold next year. I do want to touch on the fact that on Undisputed, when he was on the phone with Shannon Sharpe, just some of my TV experience, they could be in a lot of trouble, Fox, in the next couple days if Julio didn't know he was on live TV.
And that's the thing. Like, how do you – because I watched it. I replayed it like 4 times. I was like, is this staged? What is going on? And then you hear Jenny say, well, I hope he knows that he's on live TV. And she kept saying that. She said it like twice, I think. So did you feel like it was staged? Did you feel like it wasn't?
No, I don't. I think that it was just like everybody, that's in pro sports. Your phone is filled with a gazillion contacts. You're in touch with people all the time, whether it's professionally friendly. Sometimes it's professional with one person, and then it's friendly at another time. And obviously, Shannon Sharpe, being the person that he is, as a former pro football player and now one of the best analysts that we have, I'm sure Julio thought he was picking up the phone and just having a conversation with a mentor, friend, what have you, and didn't even think about what time of day it was and the fact that Shannon was on TV. I think it was more of a, let me call Julio, let's see what's up. And it's unfortunate because I don't think that Shannon or Skip or the people at Fox are that unprofessional. I think it just kind of happened. And I think it went a little bit too far.
Right.
Because I know, and a lot of people, actually anybody that's ever worked television will let you know, that stuff cannot happen. And when you start seeing it get to a point, you either got to cut it and go to commercial real quick, or in that case, you just got to hang up the phone. But it is unfortunate. The one thing that I thought was really odd is the press release that the Falcons put out the same day. They put out a release the same day, essentially just saying this is Julio's statement on his future. So then comes into play your question: was this staged? Was this supposed to happen? Because why, as a franchise, why would you put a statement out like that? I don't know. It's an interesting situation. It's a different podcast topic for a different day. But it was weird. I don't think I've ever experienced that.
And I've been watching sports for a long time. My TV has stayed on ESPN since I was in middle school every morning. So I'm like, I have never seen that before, ever. Like, as far as on the NFL level, where I'm just seeing a player, because he was talking with so much calmness that I think, like you were saying, he thought it was just a personal call. We already know the rapport that Shannon Sharpe has with, the young wide receivers and tight ends in the NFL. So it was one of those things where we're always going to be shaking our head, but we might hear something come out in the next couple of weeks to see if Fox is in trouble or not. But we're talking about wide receivers, but the success of a team falls and lives at the hands of the quarterback. So I want to ask you about Jameis Winston. Now, Jameis Winston, we know what he's done in his career. And as we keep stating, the theme of the show might be highs and lows. He's had a lot of highs and he also has a lot of lows. So I want to ask you, can Sean Payton revitalize his career? Can Sean Payton turn it around? Does he just need to change his scenery? What do you expect to see from Jameis Winston in his first year with the Saints?
I think that Sean's already changed the career of Jameis Winston. And obviously a lot of fans already know, and just hearing Jameis speak and Sean speak, Jameis is a different dude. He's a completely different guy. Now, let's be honest. And I've said this for a long time. When you put someone in a position, whether it's Jameis Winston in the NFL, whether it's a first overall pick of an NBA draft or what have you, when you put somebody that young in a position to lead and be the face of a billion-dollar industry and a multi-million-dollar team, and you go, here's the money, now be an adult, you put those kids in a tough spot. Because I look back when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, which wasn't that long ago, and I can just see maturity growth from the time I was in college to 20, 24, about to be 25. And that's without the pressure of being in the national spotlight 24/7. And you got to go back to even before he was drafted. Jameis was a Heisman Trophy winner. Jameis won what was then the BCS National Championship. His face was plastered on Sports Illustrated. He was plastered on ESPN, Sports Center, what have you. I think when you put people in that position, I'm not saying you set them up to fail, but you certainly aren't helping somebody out. And I will give Jameis this, when he was benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2018, he handled that with so much grace. He really did. And I think that was something that he needed. But seeing the transition in just the way he's spoken, and even when the news broke that he was signing with New Orleans, and props to Bob Rose at Saints News Network, I think he got that at like 2:00 in the morning. Right. But man, when he signed and said, I wanted to enroll in the QBU and learn from Sean and Drew and just take it as really like a red shirt year to really figure himself out and then see how he's spoken to media. The one thing that gets me is when he was at home and doing his Zoom media conference after he had officially re-signed the day after Drew retired, and he started getting really emotional just talking about Drew. That stuck out to me. His interview with Michael Vick, a little bit earlier than that, and he stopped Michael from stopping the show because Jameis wanted to ask Mike a question about going to Philadelphia and revitalizing his career. That tells me that was on Jameis's mind. I'm going to New Orleans to revitalize my career. It's the little things. It's the way you talk. It's the questions you ask. And it's the mindset that you have. And I think Jameis has finally realized, one, I have to grow up. If I want to stay in this league, I have to grow up because, shoot, I just signed a 1-year, $1 million contract with New Orleans. And there's not enough interest for him to be a starting quarterback. I think the best offer he got was to go back up Ben Roethlisberger for a little bit more money than what he got in New Orleans. But it would have been a similar situation. Let's have Ben mentor you, and then maybe you become the face of this franchise. I think it was the same offer in New Orleans, and you just wanted to go to New Orleans. But I think with all that being said, he's in a great spot. You're seeing all the workout videos. He's making it a point to work out with his teammates. And man, even last year, that locker room loved Jameis Winston. And there's little things that were said as well. When Taysom was named the starting quarterback, I believe it was Alvin Kamara, they asked about that. And he kind of had this weird answer about, it was very short. It was essentially, no matter who it is, we have their back. But you could tell he had mentioned Jameis somewhere in that interview. And there were reports there was a split locker room on who they wanted to start. But I think Jameis is just so beloved by that team. I think the community is really going to get behind him as well. I know right now there's a lot of people, and it doesn't help the fact that the Saints were in the Russell Wilson rumors. He was one of the Saints were one of his top 4 or 5 teams. It doesn't help that for whatever reason, there's this belief that the Saints could get Aaron Rodgers, which I'll say the same thing I said with Julio Jones. There's like a 0% chance of that happening.
Right.
But I think Jameis is going to be beloved by this team, and moving forward into the years to come, I think he could be not just a face of the franchise, not just a quality starter, but I really think he could prove to be a guy that's going to be in some of those MVP conversations. And I remember when he signed, I was thrilled. And I had people call me, friends, fellow people in the media, what do you think of this? I was like, I love it. And they said, why? He's an interception machine. He's not mature, this and that. And I said, no, listen. He's going to get a year, at least 1 year. At that time, we didn't know if Drew was going to retire. But he was going to get at least 1 year in New Orleans behind Drew and with Sean. And I said, that's going to change everything. And then hand him the keys to not just like a really nice Ford or Nissan, but he really got handed the keys to a sports car with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, and one of the best offensive lines in football, and we haven't even talked about that.
Right.
I was like, this guy's going to be set. And I really think that's going to be the case, where he's going to be able to fill in fine. And he might not be the guy that goes and throws for 4,500 plus yards to 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns or whatever. He might have just a really modest 4,000 yard season, 25 to 30 touchdowns, because he's going to be able to rely on Alvin Kamara. Latavius Murray, who I've said time and time again is the most underrated running back in the NFL. He's going to be able to rely on those guys, and Michael Thomas. And we haven't even talked about Adam Troutman, and that kid's going to have a great year this year. So I think he really got the keys to a really nice sports car, and he's going to, I don't want to say tear it up, but he's going to be exactly what New Orleans needs, and New Orleans is going to be exactly what he needs, because he got a chance to just grow up and mature. And that's what I'm really excited about this year. And I know a lot of Saints fans are pessimistic. Well, I don't know about Jameis. I don't know if this team's a playoff team, but listen, they're going to be okay. There's a lot of questions defensively. I think there's more questions defensively than offensively. And I think that's fair. But this team is going to be a team that could finish anywhere between, I almost said 10-6, but it's a 17-game season now. 10-7, 12-5. I think they have a good chance of finishing somewhere in there. They might not win the division, but they're a playoff team, especially with the becoming a 17 playoff. They're a playoff team, no question.
Right, and I like Jameis. And I think it's all about what Sean Payton and the offense requires of him. Now, Bruce Arians, we even seen Tom Brady throw some interceptions that he wouldn't typically throw, because Bruce Arians, they're slinging it down the field. They're slinging it left and right, trying to create big plays. But when you have Michael Thomas, you have Alvin Kamara, you have Deontay Harris, you have Adam Troutman. I like how you brought up Adam Troutman, footwork, his hands. He has a lot of upside. So I think that, and you have Latavius Murray, and Latavius Murray, I mean, it seems like as a Saints fan, he was averaging in my mind. I don't know the actual statistics on paper. It seemed like it was 4 to 5 yards a carry. I mean, an automatic 4 to 5 yards a carry. Good things happen when he touched the ball. And I honestly think he should have been more of an integral part of the offense. A little bit more, just a little bit more, especially in the playoff game. And I think the Saints would have seen more success in that game. But what I do want to say is that Jameis he's going to, gain the respect of the community. He has an infectious personality, and I'm excited to see what he does this upcoming season. I'm excited to see how the New Orleans Saints shape as the offseason progresses. I want to thank you, Brendan, for coming on the show today, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Make sure to check out all the work by myself. I know a lot of you guys already follow John Hendricks, and Bob Rose, and Kyle T. I know you had Kyle on sometime maybe last week. But make sure you follow all of our work at saints.media. That link will take you straight to the Sports Illustrated page. You can follow us all individually on Twitter. I'm at BT Boylan, and then you can find the rest of us from there. But Merv, man, thanks so much for having me. You're doing great things as a young man here in this sports journalism community. And it all starts by doing things like what you're doing. So keep on going. And also, I know your followers already know, but he writes good stuff too over at the Who Dat Dish. So make sure you check out both of our works and get all the Saints info you need in what should be a really fun offseason.
Right. And you can follow Brendan. His Twitter and his socials will be at the bottom right under his name. So you guys make sure to follow and just tap in with his work. But to finish the show, I always like to finish with some kind of encouragement and life tips to help get us through the day. And I want to kind of talk about a tip from Will Smith. I was watching an interview with Will Smith, and he had a quote that I really sat down and thought about over this week. And it talked about realizing how small we are in this world, but focusing on how big we can be. So what that means is being humble, having the humility to understand that, hey, there's a lot of things that I don't understand. There's a lot of things that I need to learn. There's a lot of experiences that I need to have in order to make an impact on this world. But instead of focusing on what you lack, focus on what you have, and just start making those small efforts daily to make a huge impact on this world. It was in a Will Smith interview on YouTube, and I'll go ahead and put it in the info section just so you guys know where to find it. But thank you guys for listening to today's show. I hope you guys have a great, weekend. Thank you, Brendan, again for coming on the show today. But you guys stay safe. Be blessed. Peace.